Throughout history, Korea referred to the sea between the Korean peninsula and Japanese archipelago as the East Sea. Today, however, the sea is known as the Sea of Japan in many world maps. Why is the Sea of Korea known as the Sea of Japan?
Korea for a long time was dependent on on Japan. So it was not independent. It was occupied by Japan, and therefore, during the seminars about the naming of the seas, Korea had no chance to have any influence on the naming of the seas.
The International Hydrographic Organization published the Limits of Oceans and Seas in 1929 to establish the names and limits of oceans and seas of the world. A decision was made to name the East Sea as the Sea of Japan without a representative from Korea present. As the limits of oceans and seas became a principal reference in making maps, the international community widely adopted the name Sea of Japan. Since Korea was under Japanese colonial rule at the time, Korea was unable to raise any objections to the decision.
한국 바로 알리기 사업이 결실을 맺기 시작했습니다.
Immediately after admission to the United Nations in 1992, the Korean government raised an issue concerning the naming of the sea between Korea and Japan as the East Sea at the United Nations Conference on the Standardization of Geographical Names. Since then, Korea continues to make efforts towards naming the sea as East Sea, or concurrently use East Sea, Sea of Japan in the interim. As a result of the efforts, the name East Sea has appeared steadily on world maps. When the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs conducted a survey in October 2000, concurrent use of East Sea, Sea of Japan was found on 2.8% of world maps. 5 years later in 2005, the concurrent use of both names reached 18.1%. The Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade conducted its own survey in early 2007 and discovered that the simultaneous use of East Sea, Sea of Japan substantially increased to 23.8%. Remarkably, 50.4% of maps produced in the G7 countries, excluding Japan, use both names. Despite some discrepancies in samples and surveyors, the international community appears to embrace Korea's efforts to spread the name East Sea. According to historical records such as the Samguk Sagi and the Samguk Yusa, East Sea was used for 2,000 years. In addition, the East Sea was inscribed on the King Hwanggaeto stele erected in the early 5th century. The name East Sea appears on the map of 8 provinces of Korea in the newly expanded Geographical Survey of Korea, compiled in 1531, as well as in several ancient Chinese maps.
There's a lot of Chinese historical documents, and after we examined these documents, we found that during the past 1,500 years, the East Sea was the main name of this sea area.
How was the East Sea recorded in ancient Japanese texts? In the Map of Asia, an appendix of the Report of Russia published in Japan in 1794, the East Sea is written as the Sea of Joseon, Korea, instead of the Sea of Japan. The sea is also marked as the Sea of Joseon in the simplified map of Japan's periphery and newly revised world map, both of which were prepared by Takahashi Kageyasu, an astronomer and geographer. Other 18 ancient maps of Japan from the 18th and 19th century also show that the Japanese acknowledge the area as the Sea of Joseon. In numerous historical maps discovered in the West, the Sea of Korea, or East Sea, are most common names shown on the maps, demonstrating that the East Sea, or the Sea of Korea, was not only used in Korea, but also in East Asia and the world. On the other hand, the name Sea of Japan first appeared in 1602 in Matteo Ricci's Mappamondo. The international community's wide support for the East Sea is due to the fact that Sea of Japan is simply inappropriate. Japan asserts that the Japanese archipelago divides the Pacific Ocean, and thus the sea has to be called the Sea of Japan. However, there are other cases in the world where a sea was named in a way that contradicts Japan's arguments. For example, The Atlantic Ocean divided by the British Isles is referred to as the North Sea, not the Sea of England. The sea in the Pacific Ocean divided by the Kuril Islands is also called the Sea of Okhotsk, not the Sea of Kuril.
Certainly the majority, as my understanding, is that the majority of bodies of water have a name that is independent of a country that happens to lie next to them.
It is inappropriate to name a sea after a country when it's surrounded by 4 countries: South Korea, North Korea, Russia, and Japan, and the other nations disagree with Japan over the name. The United Nations Conference on the Standardization of Geographical Names and International Hydrographic Organization recommends concerned nations to reach an agreement if a dispute exists on a specific name of a geographical area shared by several countries. The concurrent use of EC, Sea of Japan, is urged until a final agreement is reached. But Japan alleges that changing the name would cause great confusion when international organizations such as the United Nations and International Maritime Organization have already adopted the name Sea of Japan. Japan claims that giving another name to the sea between Korea and Japan could undermine the safety of aviation and navigation. However, the channel between England and France has been called both the English Channel and La Manche. Contrary to Japan's claims, the use of dual names has not caused any harm or confusion. In fact, clear use of dual names contributes to a decrease in accidents.
유엔 사무국이 2004년 6월 주 유엔 한국 대표부에 보낸 서한을 보면 유엔이 일본해를 공인했다고 하는 것은 사실이 아닙니다. 현재 유엔 사무국은 내부적으로 일본해 표기를 관행적으로 사용하고 있지만 이러한 관행이 일본 입장을 지지하는 것은 아니다라는 사실을 분명하게 밝히고 있습니다. 또한 유엔 사무국은 한일 간 분쟁 사안에 대해서 일본 측이 사무국의 중립적 입장을 무시하고 자의적으로 해석하는 것에 대해서 분명한 반대 입장을 제시하고 있습니다.
동해 바다에 명칭을 놓고 한국과 일본 치열한 외교전을 펼쳐왔는데 오늘 국제수로기구 총회에서 일본해 단독 표기를 하지 않는다는 우리 측의 유리한 제안이 나왔습니다.
To publish a new edition of The Limits of Oceans and Seas, various proposals were made during the 2007 International Hydrographic Organization Conference. One of the proposals was to divide the publication into 2 volumes. The first volume would cover all the agreed names of seas, while the second volume will be published after the resolution of the naming issues such as the EC, Sea of Japan. Korea agreed to the IHO's 2 publication idea, but Japan continues to maintain the position that only one name, Sea of Japan, is acceptable.
이것은 전 세계가 이 동해 문제가 합의되지 않은 아주 국제적으로 분쟁이 있는 지역이라는 것을 인식했다라는 것입니다. 따라서 이러한 인식이 우리가 앞으로 동해라는 이름을 사용해야 한다는 정당성을 밝히는 데 많이 활용될 수 있을 것이라고 생각합니다.
Korea neither insists on the single use of EC nor ignores the name Sea of Japan used by 130 million Japanese. Korea seeks mutual respect and acknowledgement of the name EC, used for 2,000 years in Korean history and still used by 75 million South and North Koreans. Adopting dual names, East Sea and Sea of Japan, for the time being, would become a significant point of departure for Korea and Japan to commence a new era of cooperation and diplomatic ties.